Hey guys, welcome to linguamarina. In today's video, we're going to dive into one of the most difficult sections of the IELTS exam, and that's IELTS speaking. As you know, I personally have taken the TOEFL test twice, but not the IELTS. But at LinguaTrip, we have an exceptional teacher, Anastasia, who aced the IELTS with a perfect score of 9 out of 9. Can you imagine that? Your feedback on our previous video with Anastasia has been fantastic. It got over 100,000 views in less than 2 weeks, and it inspired us to continue creating content covering each section of the IELTS exam. Without further ado, let's welcome Anastasia.
Hi! Welcome to another IELTS video, where we'll talk about how to perform well on the IELTS speaking section. In this lesson, I'll walk you through the questions from all 3 parts of the speaking section and show you ways to answer them effectively. I'll also share tips and tricks for each part so that you know what to do and what not to do on the day of the test. Let's begin with part 1. In this section of the speaking test, the examiner will ask you questions about you and your life on 2 different topics. This will last about 4 to 5 minutes. There is also an ID check and some warm-up questions at the beginning of the section, but we won't cover it today. So for today's lesson, I chose random questions so that you can get an idea of what your answers may sound like. For each part of the test, you can pause the video and answer the questions yourself. Then listen to my answers. Also, feel free to write your answers in the comments below for extra practice. We may analyze some of your comments in the next video. Let's get started. Part 1. Yes, absolutely. It's a cozy and comfortable space that I've made my own over the years. The location is great and I have wonderful neighbors. It truly feels like home to me. One of the things that I find most enjoyable about my work is the opportunity to constantly learn and grow. I find it incredibly rewarding to acquire new knowledge and skills, and then apply them to my work. I also love meeting people from different walks of life and helping them achieve their goals. The sense of accomplishment that comes from that is very fulfilling. We usually started with pencils. They were the go-to writing tool for us because we could erase any mistake. As we got older and more proficient, pens became the norm. Actually, I loved writing with a pencil when I was a teenager, but now I tend to write with pens. They provide a smoother and more precise writing experience. Plus, you don't have to constantly replace or sharpen pencils. Yes, there are a few places with stunning views in my area. One of my favorites is a nearby hill that overlooks the city. You can see the entire skyline from there, especially at sunset. It's a quiet place to relax and take in the beauty of the surroundings. That's a tough one. I've seen so many gorgeous places that it's hard to say. I think the best view I've ever seen was when I hiked to the top of the mountain during a trip to the Swiss Alps. At the top, there was a breathtaking panorama of snow-capped peaks, lush green valleys, and pristine lakes. It left me speechless. So, let's discuss this section a bit. Don't overcomplicate things. According to IELTS.org, you won't impress the examiner with complex words you don't know well. You'll only make mistakes, mispronounce them, or use them unnaturally. So my advice is to go through the most common topics for this section and write down words and collocations, maybe even some idioms, that can help you express yourself clearly and concisely. For example, cozy, skyline, surroundings. Always try to elaborate when you answer. Don't just say yes or no, or yes I did, or no, I didn't. According to IELTS.org, you are generally required to answer with at least 2 sentences. Otherwise, it will be difficult for the examiner to assess your language skills and fluency. Short answers make the examiner think that your vocabulary is limited and that you can't elaborate on the topic. Therefore, I recommend extending your answers. explaining why you think the way you do, giving examples or concessions. For example, I gave a reason for my answer and said, one of the things I find most enjoyable about my work is the opportunity to constantly learn and grow. I find it incredibly rewarding to acquire new knowledge and skills and then apply them to my work. With this in mind, be careful and don't say too much. Saying up to 4 sentences for part 1 is often more than enough. Saying more won't improve your score, but it will increase your chances of making mistakes, repeating yourself, or going off topic. Going off topic is bad. As you can see on IELTS.org, failing to address the question can result in fewer points being awarded for coherence. Don't memorize your answers. I have to admit that the idea of memorizing perfectly crafted answers is tempting. But don't think the examiner won't notice that you're reciting. In fact, memorizing your answers can be a good way to improve your grammar and vocabulary skills during the IELTS preparation process. But avoid using memorized answers on exam day. If you are unsure what to say, think about the answer you'd give in your native language and then translate it into English. Don't be too formal. You don't want to say something like, "My position on this issue is that. I'm utterly convinced that," or "My pencil was the tool that allowed me to write clearly." Choose simpler alternatives. Now that we've learned the tips and tricks for part 1, let's move on to part 2. In this part, you'll be given a cue card with the topic. You'll have about 2 minutes to talk about the topic you've been given, and 1 minute to prepare. This is what a typical cue card will look like. Let's give it a try. Well, there was one time when I ended up in an incredibly crowded place. It was a few years ago when I was visiting Tokyo with a group of friends, and during the trip we decided to explore the famous Shibuya crossing, which is known for its insane crowds. It's located in the bustling heart of Tokyo, right in front of Shibuya Station, and it's one of the busiest pedestrian crossings on the planet. And let me tell you, it lives up to its reputation. It was a warm summer evening when we decided to visit Shibuya Crossing. The reason we went there was because we wanted to see with our own eyes how hundreds of people cross the intersection at the same time. To be honest, I don't like crowded places, and I have avoided them all my life. But I have to admit that the scene was mesmerizing. With all those bright neon lights, advertisements everywhere, and a never-ending flow of people. I remember standing in the middle of the crowd and feeling a mixture of excitement and awe. It was incredible seeing so many people all in one place. The interesting thing is that despite the crowd, there is a strange sense of order. And everyone seems to be moving with a sense of purpose. Because of that, you feel a strong sense of connection to the people around you, even if you don't know any of them. It's like you're sharing this unique experience with everyone there, and it makes you feel relaxed in the midst of all this chaos. So, it was an amazing experience, and it definitely left a lasting impression on me. And I think if I were to go back to Japan, I would visit Shibuya Crossing again. What should you do to get a high score here? First, use the 1 minute you have to prepare to take notes. There are several ways to take notes. You can use mind maps, tables, or lists. Choose the method that works best for you. I suggest writing down collocations, because you simply won't have enough time to write down sentences. Second, don't worry if you don't cover all the bullet points on the cue card. According to IELTS.org, you need to demonstrate that you can speak at length. So if you manage to talk about the topic for 2 minutes, but don't cover all the points, that's fine. However, some students find bullet points very helpful, so feel free to use them if they help you. Third, avoid using too much idiomatic vocabulary. Most students think that if they stuff their answer with as many idioms and phrasal verbs as possible, they'll get a high score. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the opposite is true. If you use these words unnaturally or make mistakes with them, for example, saying once in the blue moon instead of once in a blue moon, you'll lose points. Remember, an answer like this will result in a very low score. Another tip is to organize your answer as if you were writing an essay. Use connectors and discourse markers to make your answer sound more logical. Finally, Be careful with various strategies that are given to help you succeed in Part 2. For example, the British Council and IELTS.org give one such strategy, called the PPF strategy, which is supposed to help you speak at length and demonstrate different grammatical structures. Some students love it and try to use it all the time, but others find it confusing and end up just thinking about how to implement the strategy. I think the best thing to do is to try it out for yourself and see if a strategy helps you or distracts you for practice purposes, especially for those who struggle with tenses. This strategy may be a good idea. On the day of the test, however, it's better to focus on what you say rather than the tenses you use. After your 2-minute monologue, in Part 2 of the speaking test, the examiner will ask you more questions based on the topic you discussed in Part 2. These questions are usually more abstract and allow examiners to really test your language skills. Let's look at a few questions. Well, I guess cities have become hotspots because they have great job opportunities, which attracts individuals from rural areas who are looking for a better way of life. For example, I know a girl who grew up in a small rural town with limited employment options. And after graduating, she decided to move to New York because she wanted to find a well-paying job that obviously wasn't available in her hometown. So she came to New York, and within a few years, she landed a lucrative position at a big-name tech company, which is something she definitely wouldn't have been able to do in her hometown. Plus, cities often have better healthcare and entertainment options, and a more vibrant lifestyle in general. Like, you get access to all kinds of things that you could only dream of living in the countryside. You can make appointments with highly qualified doctors when you get sick. You're exposed to constant entertainment, such as theaters, museums, and restaurants. Not to mention that cities tend to offer a wider range of educational institutions, like top universities and specialized schools. And this educational diversity is a magnet for families who want a quality education for their children. But I don't think that this urbanization trend will last very long, because more and more people are now choosing to work from home and leave the megacities. In fact, my neighbor used to work in an office, but after the pandemic, she decided to quit and work from home. And now she enjoys not having to commute every day. So in a few years, the situation may be quite different. No, I don't think so. It's possible that cities will have problems with overcrowding in the future, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't have green spaces. Frankly, I think governments and urban planners are becoming more aware of how important parks and gardens are for a better quality of life. Take Singapore, for example. They've successfully introduced greenery into their urban landscape, even though they have a dense population. For me, when I think of Singapore, I immediately think of Gardens by the Bay, which is kind of a symbol of their commitment to sustainability and urban greenery. So I think in the future they'll be implementing strategies like building parks, community gardens, and rooftop gardens to offset urban density. In my city, for example, they recently built a beautiful park downtown so that everyone can enjoy nature and relax after a long day of work. There are walking paths, playgrounds, and open green spaces that help you relax from the hustle and bustle of the city life. And you never see crowds, even though there are many visitors. How could we deal with overcrowding in cities? Actually, I can think of a few things straight away. First, more people could work from home, so they don't have to drive every day. If companies have flexible work policies that allow people to work remotely, there won't be as much overcrowding, traffic, or pollution from all those cars. We could also build nice neighborhoods and have job opportunities in areas outside the city, creating suburbs so people don't have to go into the city. The cities would be less crowded and still nice to live in. Today, for example, many people are leaving cities for quieter, more spacious suburban or rural areas. They still give them access to urban amenities, but are quieter and less hectic. This is because they no longer have to work in an office. And speaking of the green spaces we've just talked about, It's possible to increase the number of parks and gardens within a city to give residents places to relax and enjoy nature. This will reduce the feeling of overcrowding. Some key things to remember about part 3. Number 1. Expand your answers as much as you can. Unlike the first part of the IELTS speaking section, the third part is all about discussing the topic in depth. If you compare my answers in part 1 with my answers in part 3, you'll see that my answers in part 3 are much longer. They're also more detailed and include many examples. To illustrate, in my first answer, I gave several reasons why the number of people living in cities has grown so dramatically and developed them. At the end of my answer, I expressed the idea that I don't think this urbanization trend will last very long. I also explained why and gave an example of my neighbor. If you're having trouble developing your ideas, practice coming up with reasons and examples for different topics every day. You can watch videos and then give your opinion on them. Or ask your family or friends to bombard you with questions to answer. And make sure to give examples to illustrate your point when answering. IELTS.org also provides speech functions that you can use. For example, you can express your opinion, agree or disagree with something, discuss the advantages and disadvantages, give reasons and examples, describe the situation in your country, and many others. As you can see, one of the speech functions is to ask the examiner for clarification or explanation. This brings us to our second tip. Try to respond to every question you are asked. If you don't understand something, ask the examiner to repeat the question or explain it to you. Some students don't know this and may panic when they hear an unfamiliar word or phrase in the question, making it difficult for them to get a high score. However, as the British Council suggests, don't do this with every question. And don't ask the examiner to explain every word. I had a similar situation with one of my students who started asking me to explain all the questions in part 3 after he found out about this. This is not okay, because it shows that your vocabulary and listening skills are limited. Tip number 3, learn synonyms for the words you use all the time. A good exercise is to record yourself speaking. Then listen to the recording and write down the words you repeat most often. Then think of ways to change them. You can use the Cambridge Dictionary Thesaurus to find synonyms and examples, and make a list of synonyms for the most common words you tend to repeat. Tip number 4, don't panic if you don't know how to answer the question. You are not expected to know the answer to every question, just like in your native language. You may struggle with some questions, and you need time to think. If the question is difficult, you can always say, "Wow, that's a tough one. I haven't really thought about it, but my guess would be that." Or use other alternatives provided by IELTS.org or the British Council. This gives you time to think about what you want to say and shows the examiner that you can communicate effectively. Just make sure you don't answer every single question in this way. Remember, you still need to sound natural. Tip number 5, learn thematic vocabulary. You can listen to podcasts on different topics and summarize them with 5 new words, or look through vocabulary books. For example, you can use Grammar and Vocabulary for Advanced from Cambridge English. You can also use mind maps to make sure you know all the words you need to develop your ideas. This is especially important for parts 2 and 3. As you can see, the IELTS speaking section is not as intimidating as it may seem. You should speak naturally and show that you can communicate easily on any topic. Avoid overly advanced and complex structures, and concentrate on what you say rather than how you say it. Try not to sound like a robot. Use connectors and fillers, and be friendly. This doesn't mean staring into the examiner's eyes to show how confident you are, but it's good to smile and look at the examiner from time to time. You want to come across as someone who is comfortable talking, not someone who is afraid to make a mistake. Even if you make one, correct yourself and move on. Remember, even Band 9 students make mistakes, and that's okay. If you want to get feedback on your speaking and writing skills, or learn more about how to ace the IELTS test in a limited amount of time, join our IELTS prep course. We'll help you master all sections of the test in the shortest time and ensure you get a high score on the day of the test. To learn more about the course, click on the link in the description below. That's all for today. Thank you for watching this lesson. Let me know in the comments below what your target score is and which section you struggle with the most. Good luck on your IELTS journey. You can do it.
That was it for today. Wow, so much useful vocabulary in this video. I hope you took notes and got a lot out of it. Thanks so much to Anastasia for the IELTS speaking insights. Guys, drop a comment below and let us know when your test is and what score you're aiming for. If you're targeting a score of 6.5 or higher, I highly recommend checking out Anastasia's fantastic course on LinguaTrip. As you see for yourself, she's an incredible teacher and she's also an accredited teacher. And guess what? You're in for a special discount since you're watching this video. Find the link down below. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you in the next videos on this channel. Bye bye.